Do you know, I've heard he has got one of the biggest penises in Hollywood. Sorry, guys. It's just a fact.
Eavesdroppin.
Hello, Michelle.
Geordie, hello.
Guess what? I'm Geordie.
And I'm Michelle. You're listening to Eavesdroppin, the podcast.
That's right. The podcast. And you are our eavesdroppers as usual, but we have a little something different for you this week, don't we, Michelle?
We do. It's Eavesdroppin with a twist. A twist of lime, a twist of lemon.
It's a collab.
It's a midlife twist.
Woo! A midlife twist of collab action. We've got the Midlifers here.
Hello.
Welcome, Midlifers.
These gorgeous ladies, all the way from Oz.
Yes. So you're all in one time zone and I'm in a different one, but that's worked, hasn't it? Sisters are doing it for themselves.
Oh, yeah, indeed.
So, Michelle, we're going to be their guests first of all. Shall we hand over to them and be their guests?
We are, because what we're doing this week, it's a little bit of a mashup. We're starting with their format, so we're going to be talking all kinds of lovely, nostalgic things.
Yes.
Then we're moving on to a little bit of something, but you have to stick it out. You got to listen if you want to know what's coming.
For you, yes.
Eavesdropping.
Eavesdropping. So we'll hand over now to you lovely ladies, the Midlifers. We've got Mez and Fonz, and you get a little taste of what they're all about. So take it away, ladies. Girls, they want to have ladies, they want to have puns, they want to have... Don't be a dick. Girls, they want to have ladies, they want to have fellas, they want to have chicka fun with these dropping the Midlifers. Chicka fun. Who did it better?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello and welcome, Midlifers and eavesdroppers. We're your hosts, Fonz
And Mez.
and we are here joined by Geordie and Michelle. This is your weekly podcast where it's not self-help, but more help yourself as we deep dive all together into our weekly laughter and nostalgia and a deep dive into the past.
Welcome, listeners from all over the world, we hope, to our special collab podcast this week. And I have to thank you so much, Eavesdropping Girls, for inviting us today.
Yes.
So we're going to
Our
have a
pleasure.
Fantastic. We're going to have a bit of a mixture today. We're starting off because you're our Hall Pass podcast. So we're talking about all things Hall Passes to begin with. We're going Rant or Rave true crime shows because you guys, all about true crime. I'm going to get into this. And we're going to finish off with our Who Did It Better battle. We've got Once Upon a Time in Hollywood versus the movie Se7en. Let's go for it.
Well, first of all, let me just say, girls, we are so honoured to be on your podcast at the moment. Somehow we found each other through a bit of a mix-up, which is usual for midlifers and eavesdropping kind of people. We get things wrong, don't we, Michelle?
All the time.
But that little happy accident led us to you, and we're loving it. Every minute of it. We enjoy your podcast, and we hope that you enjoy ours. And there are other podcasts, it turns out. But these ones are the best.
Absolutely. As Mez was saying, this is our Hall Pass episode. We are allowing our listeners to take a Hall Pass and listen to each other.
We allow it. We allow our eavesdroppers who have a hard time every week because they've just got to be along for the ride, whether they like it or not. Well, they can turn off, but we rather that they don't. But we're allowing them to come into your world this week. Come on, guys, join us.
But apart from just being each other's Hall Pass, I thought we could look at our own sexy Hall Passes because, you know, we've all got like partners and husbands.
But those hormones, Michelle, they're dipping down. Could you really be bothered? I've got to ask. It was a real struggle for me, this one.
Really?
Yes.
Did you not have a Hall Pass when you were back in the day where you thought, oh, man, if I met that guy, I would, hit that?
Yeah, back then. But now, trying to remember who they were for a start and then trying to get the juices flowing, it was a stretch.
What about someone you'd love to have a cup of tea with?
Oh, okay. Come on.
If I'm pushed, I could possibly have a cheeky pash session with some of the people on my list.
I'm similar to you, Geordie, where now I can only think of one. But back when, in my 20s, there were a few. So how about we start off with who were our Hall Passes, in the yesteryear.
Yes,
We were a bit younger.
Yes. I love it. Well, I really struggled with this because in my 20s, because Michelle, you did ask me to find one from my 20s. And in that time, I had just moved to the UK, to London, and I had a baby. So it was really hard for me to, one, have access to a TV or have time to watch it. There was only like the channels that you had, and I wasn't really in touch with. Countdown was my only way of seeing music before that in Australia. And now I was Top of the Pops, and I didn't have time to watch it. So musicians and actors, which are usually the people you fancy, right? I didn't have much access to them. But then I remembered there was one show that I had to stay up every Tuesday night at 11:30 to watch, and it was Northern Exposure.
Oh.
I don't know if you girls even know that one. Right.
Yeah.
So I was mad about Ed Chigliak, who was the younger, dark-haired, leather-jacketed boy man. I guess he was about my age. I don't know. He was a bit like Keanu Reeves, but not like a cheap version of Keanu.
But that was your sexy hall pass.
That was my hall pass.
A second-rate Keanu.
No. The bargain basement Keanu, exactly. And for musicians, I was crazy about the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and I loved their guitarist, John Frusciante.
Oh, yeah.
Still do.
Yeah.
Even
but then he got all messed up on heroin.
Yeah, where they all say that he's responsible for River Phoenix's death.
Yeah.
You love a murderer. No, I'm joking.
It started early.
Turns out I do. I like a bad boy.
A bad boy. Nice.
But I'm going to piggyback off your bad boy. My one from my 20s isn't a bad boy per se, but in his role that I fell in love with him, he was. And Fonz, I've mentioned this to you before, he was in the movie Cruel Intentions. There's Ryan Felipe, who I thought I was going to marry. Because he was a very naughty, cheeky bad boy in it. I know in the end he sort of redeemed himself, which I wasn't interested in. But it was the hot, cheeky bad boy that I liked. So he was definitely my hall pass growing up.
Okay.
Like those blonde curls, Mez.
Yes, the noodle curls do it for me. Justin Timberlake style.
Pretty. Yeah, he's a pretty boy.
Pretty boy, yeah, actually.
Pretty bad boy.
Yep.
Well, in the 90s, I was an indie music kid. I worked at an indie record store called Waterfront in Sydney. Our international listeners won't know at all what I'm talking about, but it was like the coolest record store in Sydney. And I was working there, and I knew all musicians and promoters, and my friend's brother was a tour manager, and he brought out this band to Australia called Pavement. And I was 100% in love with the lead singer, Stephen Malkmus. So he was definitely my 90s hall pass.
What about you, Fonz?
Well,
who did you fancy?
I'm like you girls. Like, I love a bad boy, especially back then when I was younger. Like, I wanted someone to sweep me off my feet. And look, I'm just going to put down Mark Wahlberg when he was in the movie Fear in 1996. And he was with Reese Witherspoon. And they had that scene on the roller coaster. I don't know if you know about it. If you know, you know. Oh, he had a little how do we say a finger with it?
Oh.
And I'm not talking about the Arnott Scotch finger either.
Oh my God, I love that. I've forgotten about the Scotch fingers. I'll never look at them the same again. That would be a soggy one.
So
sorry, Reed.
So crunchy, golden good. With a crunch that was just made to share on a roller coaster.
Oh my God. I'd like to see the film, but I don't know about that scene. That would make me scream.
Well, in all sorts of ways, really.
Yeah.
He was such a red flag in that movie because, like, he just took over her and took her away from her family. But that roller coaster scene, my God, that had
iconic,
me.
Yep.
It got you going.
Had an impact on
Got
you.
me going. So now are we moving on forward to our men now?
30s? Or
30s?
Well, I did have a little moment in the 30s because I absolutely loved, and it took me a long time to remember this, but I loved him for years in the film Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. It was the Prince of Cats, John Leguizamo.
Oh, I love him.
And I still love him. I still love him today.
You've talked to me about this before, and I've always been like,
I really like him. He's tiny and I'm 5'10", so it would never work. Sorry, John. But I would definitely have a cup of tea with him, as you said before, Fonz.
And
or something stronger.
What about an Arnott?
But not a Scotch finger biscuit. That's actually quite exciting.
I could see that, Geordie, because we did an episode of the Romeo and Juliet movie, and we talked about John. And I'm the same. I'm 6 foot, so any tiny boy, I would just squash them. But I can see that because he has the intensity and something special about him. So I like
He
that.
does, doesn't he? Yeah, he's an amazing comedian as well.
When I was in my 30s, for me it was 100% James Gandolfini.
I knew you were going to say
AKA
that.
Tony Soprano. You know this
crazy.
about me.
There was an unfortunate image that you gave me of you having a, what do they call them? The spit roast with James Gandolfini and somebody else unattractive. I couldn't remember who it was.
I did. I said, who's your celebrity spit roast? And I had James Gandolfini on one end, and I think it was probably the tall guy from The Office.
It's in the UK.
Oh, the UK
she's talking about Stephen Merchant, a.k.a.
Stephen Merchant. It would have been Stephen Merchant on one end
for every day.
and James Gandolfini on the other.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That's an image. A little tiny Michelle in the middle.
I know, because I'm literally barely past 5 foot. So, yes, I would have definitely been Piggy in the middle of that. I just, honestly, I always thought he and I might have been, eating cannoli into the sunset together. But, he's dead now. He did not end up being my husband. So
no, but I think he probably would have cocked it a bit sooner if you were engaging in those kinds of sexual deviances. Don't you think?
Well, I don't know, especially if there was a packet of Arnott Scotch finger. Bring it on.
Stop.
I don't know, but what about with the cannoli? Hello.
Oh, hello.
That's a yeast infection waiting to happen. Too much sugar. But I have one that I haven't really told anybody apart from I finally shared it with my family when we were watching Chaos the other day, which is the Netflix show about the Greek mythology. Now, I know I like an older man generally. And I know that Jeff Goldblum is pretty amazing looking and everybody loves him as an older man. But even next to him, this guy shone so much brighter that my daughter, who is 14, and my husband both said we would also add him to our hall passes. And it's the actor who played Stannis Baratheon in Game of Thrones, the actor's actor, Stephen Delane. I have loved him for more than a decade consistently. You don't even know who he is.
I need a picture.
He's an old guy.
Sorry, but how old is old?
He's probably about 10 or 13 years older than me. So he's in his 60s.
Okay.
No, he's probably approaching 70 now. I think he's approaching 70 now. Stannis the Manus, wasn't he, in Game of Thrones? Everybody loved Stannis. You didn't watch
the
that?
name sounds I remember the character's name Stannis, but I can't picture him. I must Google this.
You'll Google him and then you'll go, oh, that guy.
Okay. All right, girls. Who's your right now hall pass?
Well, I'm going to go again. I'm similar to what I said about John Leguizamo. How do you pronounce it? Leguizamo. This guy I've mentioned to Fonz before, I like because on screen his presence is so strong. Plus, he's almost as tall as me. He's a big fella.
Lovely.
Tom Hardy.
Oh, yes. He was at my children's assembly once because somebody, I know, I wasn't there. Somebody's got his godchild at my kid's school. How lovely is that?
I know. Yeah. Oh, yes. So he's broad-shouldered. He can pick me up and carry me and do whatever he wants with me. And just his charisma and spark, and he's so talented as an actor. I have a thing for actors, so that is my.
He's got a nice face. He's got a nice face too.
Nice face, but it's a little bit not. It's not perfect. It's a little bit rugged.
Yeah, it's a bit rough.
Yeah. Yes,
I get that. I agree with that. Well done. Well chosen.
Thank you.
Well, I put down for my 30s Liam Neeson when he was in Taken because I want someone to call me and say, I will find you with his very particular set of skills.
Do you know, I've heard he has got one of the biggest penises in Hollywood. Sorry, guys, but it's
Don't be
fact.
Sorry.
Apparently it's huge.
Really?
I would not have pictured that.
You can now. Helen Mirren apparently let slip that it was enormous.
Oh, thank you, Helen.
Because she was dating him for a while.
Oh, really? Oh, hang on. I did hear.
Oh, no, I've got the facts.
Yes, you do. Well, that's just made him even better.
No, but he is quite charismatic. I like him.
I love his strong features.
Who would your today whole pass be?
I put Pedro Pascal, the Chilean-American actor, who people
doesn't
know
love him?
him as Zaddy. Mez doesn't like him.
I
Oh.
like him
know
as a
him.
person, but no, he doesn't do it for me.
He's
No.
asexual. No, asexual as in, I feel like there is nothing, you can't
Nothing.
tell who he goes to. He's got no relationship that we know
Oh.
about. Is he gay? Is he straight? But he's a zaddy.
He
And I found out
admitted-
what that was just yesterday.
Yeah, it's a man with swagger and fashion sense. And he did admit in an interview he liked being submissive. So he could be submissive to
church.
me.
Oh,
Oh my God.
Michelle.
I
Who's
think
Michelle's?
Oh, well, mine's kind of boring, but I mean, it's Ricky Gervais.
Oh.
I love a funny guy. He don't what? What's wrong with that?
All of our
You've gone for
faces.
lookers. You guys have gone for lookers. I've gone for the hot guy.
Sorry, Ricky, but
It's fine. He's going to laugh you into bed. Also, and this will not come as a surprise to Geordie, you could also throw Matt Berry in there because
Oh.
I'm not sure. who that is.
I would go there. I would go there.
they don't know who he is, Michelle. He's Toast of London, if you know that TV show.
London.
No.
He was in the IT crowd as the boss.
He's not a looker. He'd have a good time. So that would be my
Michelle
hot
likes a
part.
laugh
I
in the
do.
sack.
I like a laugh.
I like our eclectic mix of men.
Very eclectic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, we had to give them all a chance, right? I mean, if we all went for the same guy,
Oh.
Yes. Bless them.
Yeah.
Ray.
Today, ladies, we are going to rant or rave true crime media. And by media, we mean true crime podcasts like Eavesdroppin. We mean TV shows. We mean whatever, books, whatever.
You know, we actually considered why do I love or not love watching crime shows, and I was trying to pinpoint what it is, some of the things that I rave about it. And for me, the number one thing is the satisfaction in the solved crime cases of knowing that the perpetrators got their justice in the end. That to me is the biggest rave. That's what I'm starting off with.
It's not much fun when they get away with it.
No, and that's why I hate the unsolved mysteries, because I
Yeah.
hate at the end, and there's no
You need closure.
no. Yes,
Yeah.
I need closure. Me,
Because
who
it's
has nothing to do
horrifying.
with the case, needs closure.
Yeah. It's horrifying. Can I just quickly say that for us, when we do, because we don't just do true crime, we also do supernatural and real life, and I love occult, but and conspiracies as well. But for us, we have a hard time because we're comedy. We have a hard time doing our true crime cases because they can be awful. And there's always victims or the victims' families who have obviously lost their lives in some horrific way. And then those people are still living on. Sometimes, they listen to our podcast as well and we get contacted. So it can be quite nerve-wracking for us to remember and honor the victim in each of these crimes. And then being very careful about the comedy that we use within it. But I will say, when it comes to true crime, I do love a podcast. Can't do a TV show because it's too visceral. Can't watch, can't see it unless it's something like a cult. And I loved Jonestown, Terror in the Jungle, which was co-produced by Leonardo DiCaprio, actually. That was great.
Oh, wow.
What is it about cults that you like to
It's the
listen about?
psychology of it. The psychology. How do they get people to follow them? I mean, obviously, Michelle and I do a lot of cults, so we understand that usually there's a few things at play. There is the isolation. There's taking them away from their family, telling them, we understand you, the love bombing. Then there's, what else is there, Mish?
Nobody signs up for a cult. Most people think they're signing up for a wellness retreat or some kind of self-help group.
Holistic. Yeah.
And they don't, they're not like, hey, I'm going to join that cult. It's people who are vulnerable. They're at a low point in their lives and they just get kind of targeted and, like you said, love bombed. But yeah, we love a cult and it's always fascinating.
Are the leaders often charismatic?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
David Koresh was somehow that way. Jim Jones, also charismatic. And of course, Charles Manson. was a charismatic leader as well. And I'm going to go on to talk about him later on. So maybe you'll find out a bit more information about that.
Yes. Well, can I just give a rave about my local social media crime prevention page? I don't know if you guys know Neighbours and Mrs. Mangle, but I love being a skivvy. And I love watching everyone's ring footage and the statistics and what's going on in the street. Oh, that's my true crime.
You're a curtain twitcher.
I am. Mrs.
I love
Mangle.
it. I'm that too. I love a curtain twitch.
So have you ever solved a case like somebody stole an Amazon parcel off someone else's doorstep and you're like, boom, I've got the ring footage?
I was involved in a case, as in my husband was overseas and I was home alone and a man knocked on my door and he was asking about our car parked out the front. And he goes, I'm local. Is this for sale? I'm like, no. I'll let you know if it is. And I looked out the window when he left and he took a photo of our street sign. And so I called the police and go, no, this is very sus. Had to send the footage. And Mez, I'm sorry, I've got no closure on it. I haven't heard anything.
Oh. I was waiting for a grand ending.
Touch wood, the car's still there, but that was my bit of true crime.
But I think going back to what you were saying about our podcast, we do a lot of true crime. And for us, it isn't that simple because, we have to stand behind what we do. And effectively what we're doing is true crime as entertainment. And you have to sort of at some point think, is that ethical? Because even though we are a comedy podcast and we do serve up the laughs, like you said earlier, Geordie, we have to be aware that, behind every headline, there's a real family and they are dealing with consequences that are really complex from whatever crime. And I hope that our listeners sort of see that we try to approach these stories with care. And I think the rave of what we do is that we try to do it thoughtfully and try to do it more than just entertainment, because we know that true crime, it can educate, it can raise awareness, it can lead to justice in some cold cases. It's like what happened with Lynn Dawson in Australia or the Adnan Syed with the Serial podcast series. But for us, we have had a couple of true crime things that we've dealt with. Certainly we had one of our very early episodes where Geordie and I both knew a murderer in Canberra. And that was quite an intense... As teenagers.
Wow.
And I knew him from when I worked at Macca's in Dixon, and Geordie knew him.
He was in my circle of friends, yeah. Michelle and I didn't know each other at the time.
Wow.
So then we both realised we knew this murderer. And then actually...
Which kind of shook the town and the kids in the town at the time.
Yeah.
It was
a violent crime. It was horrible.
Very violent murder. And another episode we did on Eavesdroppin was when one of our listeners asked us to investigate another hometown murder, a Canberra murder, where when I investigated it, I realised his name, the murderer's name, was not in the public domain. So we had a real
that
ethical,
makes it tricky for us.
Issue of, do we out this guy? And in the end, we decided not to, but we did the episode, and it was a brother-sister murder. The brother killed the sister. And one of our listeners had gone to school and just said, why has this been forgotten? I can't find anything on this murder. So even though we did that episode as, I guess, entertainment, we had to face the ethics of not outing this guy, but giving enough information that people, I guess,
could come to that
if they're interested, they could find this guy if they wanted to. And actually it gave some closure to our listener who had requested the deep dive. So, we
got a lot of interest from other people about that too. And some of them came on board and contacted us with their own armchair detective work. And it was a bit worrying. We thought, oh, shit, what have we done to that guy, for that guy,
Well, do you know what? We had a comment literally a few weeks ago on YouTube on that episode. So, there's like...
We don't want a court
case. From the other side of it, I love a true crime podcast. So, there's rant and rave here for me. I see both sides of it.
Well, I love that I know with Australian podcasts, like some true crimes, cold cases have been solved due to the podcast rehashing it.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It can be useful when done right. Yeah.
I'll just put one rant there because we've got a lot of rave, but also just the dark side of humanity. And that's the confrontational part about it, I suppose, is to see what humans are capable of. That's on the rant side. On the rave side, especially with cold cases, I love when you hear about the detectives or about the family member that just can't forget about it and keeps revisiting it and wants to, again, bring the perpetrator to justice. So you see, obviously, both sides of the spectrum. So
We love that. Often the family of the victim, they feel left out or forgotten about when it becomes a cold case. And often they are quite integral in making the case come alive again and actually finding the perpetrator.
I always find that when you hear the traits of, say, a sociopath or someone, a murderer, and you think, I've got some of these traits. And what makes me people? I've heard other people say it second guesses themselves. Am I capable of this?
Could I kill?
Yeah,
Could I kill a person?
I have heard also, though, that if you're asking that question of yourself, you're not a
You're all right.
psychopath.
Yeah.
Because
Okay,
they
that's
would
good.
never ask that question of themselves. So you're okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
Good one.
everyone, my family, you're all okay.
You're safe.
Everyone can
You
sleep
don't have
easy
to
now.
hide the knives when she comes round.
All right. So I think it's safe to say that all in all, are we all raving true crime shows?
Rave it.
Rave.
Yeah.
Rave.
Rave it up.
Who did it better?
Ding, ding.
Ding dong.
Here is the thing. This week we are battling two movies featuring the beautiful Brad Pitt, both with some murderous and gruesome scenes. We've got the movie Se7en, directed by David Fincher, versus Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is obviously a Quentin Tarantino big showcase movie. So usually with this, we've got the lead actor versus the lead actor, which is Brad Pitt versus Brad Pitt. So
Easy.
win for both. In the movie Se7en, it's more of a detective drama thriller. So it features Brad Pitt. We've got the beautifully voiced Morgan Freeman as the two detectives trying to find out who is the killer, John Doe, which is played by Kevin Spacey. And the whole premise of this film is John Doe is targeting victims who he thinks have committed one of the 7 deadly sins. Has anyone watched these movies?
I watched it. Yeah, I watched it at the time and found it quite dark and quite distressing and disturbing. Since then, I've seen all manner of things which are even more shocking. So,
Okay.
but it was dark, like you couldn't see what was going on. Luckily, I had the subtitles on so I could hear what was going on. But I will say, Morgan Freeman, bloody gorgeous. Isn't he wonderful? I love the nuanced acting from him. I love the way he was performing. But Brad, I think it's early days for Brad. I don't think he's found his feet yet. He's a bit irritating. He looks too young to be the detective on this case. And Morgan Freeman keeps asking him, why are you here? And he says, I'm better than you think I am, you know? And actually his acting is a bit kind of subpar, I would say, in that one.
Fair enough. But I do say the final scene, which we'll get to a bit later on.
Of course. Yes.
The emotional.
Never forget
He does
that.
have the emotion in that. But yes, he is like the rookie detective and trying to prove his worth to the well-rounded Morgan Freeman's character. I like they're seeing their relationship has evolved, sort of like almost takes him under his wing a bit to teach him. But insane about the visual effects, because the way they actually filmed it, they had rain machines constantly, which actually made the director sick on set.
Yeah.
And they actually, I don't bleach the film. They did something to the film to make it look that way, to look washed out, which is interesting when the movie productions do this, because in the end, we want to see the movie, because that reminded me of Game of Thrones, particularly the last season.
Yes.
Where
That's
everyone
what I
was
meant.
squinting because you couldn't see anything.
That second last episode when they had the big battle, I mean, I was ready to shut my eyes anyway because it's zombies and I'm scared of them, but it was pitch black.
Yes. So I do like when directors try to do something like that, but you have to remember the audience has to be able to see it.
We want to see it.
I felt like Brad Pitt from being like the little cheeky chappy, like sexy cowboy in Thelma and Louise, where, come on, like gorgeous, to this, it was a bit of a stretch. I think he is still finding his feet. I'm not a fan of Gwyneth, so I was a bit like, whoa. But actually, the film it's dark. And I think it's from a time when, even though you said we've seen more gruesome things, it's kind of chilling. It's kind of a gruesome film, and there's iconic scenes galore. The people, obviously, with all the hanging
the
air fresheners,
the Christmas tree,
all of that kind of stuff.
Pine tree.
There are scenes from that film that just live on, and obviously we're going to talk about at the end. I'm sure you're going to ask what's in the box.
I know what's in the box. Gwyneth Paltrow's vagina candle. Smell it from over here.
Those things blow up. Yeah,
they do. What I liked about Seven was that, kind of like the Zodiac Killer, it did show the intricacies that a murderer can go to before they're found. And this one followed the 7 deadly sins, and each was so gruesome because they didn't lead up to the perfect expectation of that murderer. Yeah. And I just found that so clever as well as so dark.
But in comparing the two, I can just say, because this movie is unsettling in all what he actually does in the murders, but you don't see the murders, you see the outcome.
Correct.
Whereas Quentin Tarantino, obviously, he's very violent movies and stylized violence, but you see the violence. Whereas this, you don't actually see any of that. You just see the aftermath. And the way it ends, which let's lead on to the ending because it is so good. The whole thing, again, not seeing everything but seeing the gruesomeness and the way the twist at the end and the what's in the box. It is, the whole movie leaves you with an unsettled feeling, which I kind of love because it's not, you don't usually get that in a movie, and it's enough that even so many years on, it can, if it still affects you in a way, to me, that is a sign of a film that's made really well.
Yeah.
No, it was a good film. Absolutely. David Fincher is a brilliant director.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So we've got the Brad Pitt that no one likes as much.
We didn't like him.
But now we've got him in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood playing the stunt double Cliff Booth. He's Leonardo DiCaprio's Rick Dalton's stunt double. And this is made, I think, in 2019. We've got Margot Robbie playing Sharon Tate. And the whole movie is actually I like this way it's written, an adult fairy tale version of the events surrounding the 1969 Tate murders by the Manson family. So it's sort of like an alternate reality and an ending that we all really would have loved to have happened compared to the reality of what happened.
Yeah. It's an amazing film. I absolutely loved it. Obviously, I've got an interest in the Manson family because it's a cult. We've done lots of episodes on it before. I'll tell you a bit more about that later. But Clint Booth, his character, both of them together, Brad and Leonardo, were a great double act. I loved
great
that
chemistry.
Yeah, and I loved that Leonardo was playing this washed out, fan favorite from years gone by, but now he's just always a bit part villain, and he's a bit overweight, and he's a bit shit, and sorry if I've sworn, is a bit not very good, and can't get a job, and nobody wants Clint Booth around because there's a bit of suspicion about how his wife died as well, and he's provocative, and he's a little bit kind of does his own thing. That's what you love about his character, and I particularly enjoyed on second watch, and even the first time round, his bravado competition with like butting heads with not Jackie Chan, what's his name again? Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee on the lot, and he knocks him in, throws him into a car and dents the car. He gets in trouble and gets kicked off the lot. But it's an amazing scene, and you get to grips with who Brad Pitt's character of Clint Booth is quite early on. That's a good film for me. I really enjoyed it.
Is it Cliff or Clint?
I can't remember.
I think it's Cliff. Like Cliff
I said
Richards.
Clint.
Did you?
Cliff Richard. That's right. Sorry, Cliff. Cliffy.
Well, I have to say, Geordie, I did not love this movie. I feel like, where's the Tarantino flair? The film to me felt flat, the dialogue felt basic. It just felt slow. There was no pace. The characters felt a bit lifeless, although I do agree with you that Leonardo and Brad had good chemistry, and I feel like Brad was great in this. But yeah, I didn't love it, and I guess I just felt a little bit like the ending confused me a little bit, and it wasn't for me. And I love a lot of other Tarantino films, but this one was a bit of a dud for me. Sorry.
I'm like you, Michelle. I mean, I love Quentin Tarantino. Like, I love Kill Bill. I love that he makes the women the victors in the films.
Yeah.
And in this one, I suppose the victor was that Sharon Tate did not die in this film. Yeah. I did enjoy it, but it was like, okay, I like that twist that he turned it into a fairy tale. He turned something true to life into something fictional.
I mean, it was a nice concept, but I felt like it was too much style and not enough substance, and it just didn't have that Tarantino punch and flair and the dialogue. And I
disagree about the Tarantino punch and flair, because Tarantino to me is a massive movie geek and Pulp Fiction geek, you know. He loves all that old Hollywood glamour. He's chosen the perfect story to reinvent. And yes, there is the dialogue. I understand what you're saying there, Michelle. The dialogue can be pretty basic because he's doing a lot of spelling out, like the party at the Playboy Mansion where somebody's describing, I can't remember which characters are talking, but they're kind of describing who Roman Polanski is and his new wife, Sharon Tate, and who's this guy, J. Sebring, the celebrity hairdresser who also died in the Tate LaBianca murders in 69 at the hands of the Manson family. And that was a really nice insight into their lives, because you don't really have much to do with the victims as such in this case, because they aren't really part of the main story. They're just this kind of add-on in a nice way to get us all interested, I suppose, because we all know about the Tate murders.
Yeah.
So who wins this?
I think usually the question I ask myself is, which one would I watch again? If I had the chance to watch two right now, which one I'd choose? So for me, it's Seven.
I have to agree.
Once Upon a Time. No,
Oh.
I'm out. It's Once Upon a Time. Yeah.
But do you know what? I will just say that I did read a couple of days ago that Brad Pitt is reuniting with David Fincher for a new take on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's not a sequel. They're calling it a
different version.
Derivative.
Where they do die.
I don't know. But Tarantino's writing it and Fincher is producing it for Netflix. Yeah, I think that's interesting.
Cool.
That's really
amazing.
That's meshing both movies together, isn't it?
Eavesdropping, dropping like it's hot. Ooh, eavesdropping, dropping, and eavesdropping, dropping like it's hot. Segueing seamlessly into our true crime story this week, I know we've talked about Charles Manson before. Back in season 4, episode 34, we did an episode called Manson Family, Where Are They Now? So you'd think by now we've wrung every last drop out of this story, right? But hang on to your hats, ladies, because there's so much more. I need your full attention here for this one. Michelle Margarita, are you present? Yes, miss. Put your hands up.
Present and correct.
I'm going to take you all back on a journey to the 1960s counterculture, FBI files, a Hollywood that was less about peace and love and more about smoke and mirrors. And thanks to our resident white witch and documentary enthusiast for recommending to me this Netflix documentary called Chaos, The Manson Murders, which I did watch. Don't know if you guys have seen it.
No, I haven't. But I know that our resident white witch, Safka, she's been on it. She has been telling us to get on the chaos train.
So this documentary gets into the theory that Charles Manson wasn't just a twisted cult leader who manipulated young people into doing his dirty work, but something more useful to the powers that be. In 1999, there was a journalist called Tom O'Neill who was asked to do a 3-month assignment from the film magazine Premiere to write about the Tate LaBianca murders, which changed Hollywood at the time in 1969, as we all know. Tom O'Neill missed his deadline, but he continued to investigate the murders, and then this book was published in 2019. It's called Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s. And O'Neill's theory posits that Charles Manson was either protected or at the very least allowed to operate by law enforcement and intelligence agencies who saw him as a handy foil to discredit the radical left, which had risen throughout the 60s.
Okay.
Wow.
They were using him as a tool. Yeah. So that's why he got away with a bunch of stuff.
Before he was, because he went to prison.
During. So he went to prison. He spent most of his teenage years and first adulthood in prison, reluctant to leave. It was the only home he knew. But when he came out and he amalgamated these kids into his family, he got away with all sorts of things. Let's rewind back to that time, the 60s, right? A time of revolution, off the back of repression. And as we know, it was free love, people hitting back against the man, not to mention lots of mind-bending drugs. And this naturally became a threat to those in power. Such was the overwhelming support for the movement, a bit like nowadays with our right-wing MAGA-loving fans that we see on the internet. But back then, you had students protesting against the Vietnam War, civil rights movements such as the Black Panthers gaining momentum, women burning those bras like there's no tomorrow. Imagine what that must have been like. We have a choice whether or not we want to wear bras these days. But back then, you were relegated to the kitchen, you were in your skirts, ladylike, etc. What if you didn't fit that mold? Imagine the freedom that must have been to have that movement sweep across the nation. And you didn't have to shave your armpit hair and you didn't have to wear a bra. How wonderful.
And it's all before social media too, how they all banded together for this.
Well, that's exactly a good point, Fonz, because at the time I was doing the research for this, I was thinking this all happened without the aid of the internet. So the Black Panthers in particular were openly challenging the state. And if you recall, if you know anything about the Manson murders, the reason that the prosecution and apparently Charles Manson himself gave for the motive for the Tate LaBianca murders was to frame the Black Panthers, start a race war so that he and his family could then hide out in the Californian desert caves, only to emerge once the whole war was over and they could come out victorious and a superior race. That was Manson's ideal.
But do you remember when we spoke about this on a previous episode, we were both like, bullshit, like the most ridiculous
It does
theory.
sound stupid.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
Something else is going on here.
Well, interesting that you should say that, Michelle, because this is exactly what the journalist Terry O'Neill believes. He goes on to say that the establishment struggled to accept things like communes, acid, free love. They wanted an end to this freedom and to assert more control over the population. So the FBI introduced something called COINTELPRO, which was a covert program designed to infiltrate and dismantle radical political movements. And there was Operation Chaos, which was a domestic espionage targeting citizens between 1967 and 1974. And that involved their agents disrupting these groups like the Black Panthers, getting in there and kind of breaking them apart from within. So their main targets were civil rights leaders, student protesters, black nationalists, and the growing new left. And the aim was to create chaos, division, and discredit those who were kicking against the pricks, so to speak. And then our anti-hero and dark messiah, Charles Manson, comes along and stumbles into this scene. So if Tom O'Neill, the journalist who posits this theory that he was allowed to operate, was right, then who was protecting Manson? Like I said, he'd been in and out of prison for most of his life. He was released in 1967. He was a tiny little guy, Michelle, who would have looked you in the eye. Ex-convict with a guitar and a messiah complex, reluctant to leave his prison kind of home, if you like. Yet somehow in under 2 years, he'd amassed a loyal group of mostly middle-class girls, moved them to that ranch outside of LA and gained access to celebrities and producers.
You know, I said to you, is it because people thought he was hot? Was he a hot cult leader?
No one thinks
No,
he's
but
hot,
I mean,
Michelle.
he's got the psycho eyes.
But then they did because they were
I
all
know,
having
but that's
sex
the
with
thing.
him.
Like, he's got the psycho eyes, but those girls must have felt like, you know, they would smash that because, I mean, I think he was charismatic too. He had something. He had a little bit of something going on. That is also, I think, something you have to remember.
Absolutely.
But I think you're right. Who was protecting this guy and why? Big questions here.
Well, what was he doing? They were saying, I know he was saying in and out of prison, but from 1967 for the Tate murders, like those 2 years, what was he doing that he was getting away with apart from
drugs,
being
underage
guns?
girls?
He was getting all involved in big underage girls in big drug deals. There was the attempted assassination of this guy whose name I can't remember. I think we had it in the previous episode. I think it was Big Daddy or something like that. And there was a few murders that he could have been responsible for. Yeah, firearms, all sorts of things. He was getting pulled over left, right and centre and always getting let off.
Okay.
And this is what struck the journalist O'Neill as suspicious, because he was always being arrested and there was car theft and he kept getting released. All the charges would be dropped. The cases would disappear. And at one point, even his parole officer admitted that he should have gone back to jail multiple times but didn't.
Okay, so something more at play.
But was he a sweet talker in the court, because he's charismatic? Like, could he have been making a great argument to the judge and getting
If you think about it, they hate the hippies, okay? The establishment hates the hippies, yet there's this massive king of hippies out there who is getting away with it over and over again.
And did he at that point have like all the stuff carved into his
No, that was
forehead?
during the trial. That was in the trial.
Right,
Yep.
right. Okay, so he looked normal at this point.
Well, normal for the time with the long hair and the skanky clothes and living in buses and
the crazy
caves. And the
eyes.
crazy eyes, of course, that Michelle loves so much. She finds so attractive.
I'm not saying I thought he was a hot, cult leader. I'm just
We've heard your hall passes now.
He's not my hall pass.
There's no James Gandolfini.
Exactly. And I would not give that guy a packet of Arnotts, okay? He would not be getting that.
Some would argue that Charles Manson was allowed to operate freely because he was so useful. Because then in 1969, when the Tate LaBianca murders happened, the public had their suspicions about these so-called hippies, but were yet to turn against them. So along comes this madman who looks like the ultimate hippie nightmare, acid-fueled, long hair, barefoot, girls under his tutelage. They go around stabbing pregnant starlets in Beverly Hills, and the perfect storm was created. And just like that, peace and love is over. Kaboom, dead, literally.
Okay, so the sort of theory is that by doing this, everyone turns against the hippies, and that's the end of the free love era.
That is O'Neill's theory, absolutely.
It's a bit simplistic, no?
It is simplistic, and O'Neill has absolutely nothing to go on. Not in the documentary, not in his bloody book either. He doesn't give you any kind of facts, apart from the COINTELPRO and the Chaos, which were literally existing. They were those two programs, and Operation Chaos, they did exist. I think it was, I can't remember.
J. Edgar Hoover?
Yes, I think it's J. Edgar Hoover. That is exactly it. J. Edgar Hoover did start these programs and had his FBI carry them out, infiltrating groups. So he kind of put two things together, and the fact that Manson was never being arrested and his control over his followers was terrifying. We all know it's because he was charismatic and these kids had nowhere else to go, and a lot of them were on mind-altering drugs. But that then leads into other theories as well involving mind control. You see, Manson had spent time previously at McNeil Island Penitentiary, where he reportedly learned manipulation techniques, including from pimps who taught him how to control women. But there were also rumors at this time were also that during his time in the clinic, he may have been exposed to MK Ultra, which is the CIA's now declassified mind control program. So think those films like The Manchurian Candidate, Michael Caine's The Ipcris File, where they're trying to create like a human soldier who has no will of their own. And in fact, there's a theory behind MK Ultra being responsible for Robert F. Kennedy? No, who's the brother? Bobby Kennedy. His assassination. They believed that was an MK Ultra operative. The conspiracy theorists think that. So we know that's a real thing. And again, we've discussed this in an episode 24, season 3. Go back, have a listen. Let me just quickly tell you about MK Ultra for those who don't know. Beginning in the 1950s, the US government believed that Russia had developed ways to control people's minds. So the CIA decided to embark on their own mind control methods and created top secret Cold War initiative MK Ultra. And basically they illegally experimented on people to see if the mind could be wiped, reprogrammed or controlled using LSD, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and more to test how to break down and rebuild personalities. Scary, right?
So what you think that maybe they did the LSD mind control stuff on Manson, which is why he got the crazy eyes, because he's absolutely like mental at that point. And you can kind of see he does look a bit like drug messed up.
Yeah. But he's never as messed up as everybody else, because in some of the books I've read, he never takes as much as everybody else.
Oh, because, well, he's a control freak too, probably. Interesting. Yes.
Yeah, that's how he keeps his grip on men and women, you know, in his family. O'Neill, the journalist who has this crazy theory, he believes that Manson was part of that system, either trained or tested upon, exactly as you said, Michelle. So did the government see him as a chaotic Pied Piper who could do what they couldn't do, which was to discredit the radical youth from within? Perhaps. But now I need to tell you about the prosecutor on the Manson trial, Vincent Bugliosi. He was responsible for sending Manson to prison, and then he wrote the best-selling true crime book of all time, Helter Skelter, about the crimes. He's been depicted as a crusader for justice, but was Bugliosi's case airtight, or was it just theatrics? Was it just a way to write and sell the book? They say in this documentary that while he was prosecuting this theatrical, you know, this is when the crosses happened in the head, and the girls shaved their head when he shaved his head, and they're all singing, and anything that Manson did in the trial courtroom, the girls would do in the next trial the next day. All the while, the prosecutor, Vincent Bugliosi, was writing this book, they say, Helter Skelter, about his theory, which was the Helter Skelter theory about the race war, which I mentioned before. I know it's hard to keep up, and I'm all over the shop here.
You're good.
You all got it?
Yeah.
We're on board, yep.
So it is a wild theory, the race war, and it was coming. So he orchestrated those murders in order to frame the Black Panthers, and then that would start the war. Even people involved in the case say that that wasn't the full truth. But Bugliosi focused only on that narrative and downplayed any other motives. For example, other motives: Manson's rage over being snubbed by the record producer Terry Melchers, who is the son of Doris Day, who used to live at the Tate House. Girls, you are nodding, and I know you've got some facts about that.
That was the fact.
Because I had always heard of the Manson family and the Sharon Tate murders, but I hadn't actually realised Manson was a budding musician. And yeah, that was, I think, was it one of the Wilson brothers?
Beach Boys.
Yeah, so I didn't realise all
Dennis
that.
Wilson was heavily involved with them, yes. And actually, he took some of the songs over to the boys, and they recorded one of his songs, but they didn't give him any credit. He was fuming about that. And recently, I was talking to one of my young colleagues at my other job, and he said he'd heard some of the music of Manson, and they were really into it. They thought it was great. I had to put him straight and say, that guy's not good.
No.
And eventually he was like, no, you're right. But yeah, he wasn't a bad songwriter.
But also on top of that, I think Guns N' Roses released one of his tracks as well.
Oh,
really? I didn't know that.
And Marilyn Manson.
That's
Of
not
course.
surprising.
But a tune's a tune, right?
Oh.
Exactly.
Can you listen to Kanye?
Or did he?
No thanks. Or what about Rolf Harris?
Oh.
Those songs are out the window now. At one point, they wanted to make Time a Kangaroo Down the national anthem when I was at school. There was a whole thing about that. Good job they didn't.
It would be a very risky move.
Can I say my father-in-law has actually got Rolf Harris's wobble board, and he was saving that to sell for his retirement, and now it's down the tube.
Oh, I've heard that story before. Not that same one, but I've got friends with artwork by him that they were saving for their retirement. Oh, what a nightmare. Sorry about it, guys.
He's got a lot to own up to.
So that was one of the theories, the one about Terry Melchers, the anger at not being invited into this world of music. He was taken so far down the road by Dennis Wilson and then dropped. So he was after the people he thought responsible, which was Terry Melchers. And I think Dennis Wilson was next as well. I think he was on the hit list. Or could it have been all these drug deals that went wrong? They had already killed a man, Gary Hinman, a few days or weeks, I can't remember how long beforehand. And he was training these people to basically get their hands dirty, his family, to get their hands dirty so that they would be, again, like any good cult leader, kind of tied to him in a way. They're collateral, if you like.
Yeah. Because we talk a lot about that with cults, that they, you have to submit something personal about yourself or be coerced into revealing something, which then they can hold over you in future. So I guess...
And a murder is perfect, really, isn't it? But Bugliosi ignored those two motives and instead focused on things which is tying it to the Beatles, the apocalypse, and the counterculture. And he created this enormous narrative that sold books and made Manson the poster child for the dangers of the hippie movement.
So, Geordie, listening to all of this, which all sounds so far-fetched, we talked about the race war thing as like, bullshit, it's ridiculous. And a lot of these theories also sound like so out there. What's the deal? What do you really think is going on here?
Well, I don't really know, do I? Because I wasn't there. But I'm looking at all these facts and going, I don't think that O'Neill has a good case, really, because he hasn't backed it up with facts, apart from the fact that these things were going on in the background at the time. You can't tie everything up into one neat bow and tie it up and present it as the answer. Was Vincent Bugliosi a good guy? Was he doing his job properly? Or was he just part of a bigger picture spinning a tale, that suited the system? Like I said, I can see this is all a lot to take in. So let's fast forward to Quentin Tarantino's masterpiece, I call it, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which, as we've just discussed, is a work of fiction based on truth. It's a fantasy that rewrites history. And in his version, Sharon Tate and her house guests survive, and the LaBiancas get to live their murderers are taken care of, on that first night. And it's all thanks to Brad Pitt's aging stuntman, Cliff Booth, and his buddy, Leonardo DiCaprio, and their prop flamethrowers. They all get obliterated. But beneath this reinterpreted ending is a happy one. It's a happy ending for Tarantino's film. But he still highlights how the Hollywood of that time was changing and innocence was lost, and how there was something really wrong with the system and there was rotten things lurking underneath the glitz and the glamour.
The film does have, another layer where you can look at it in that way. But if you look at actual Manson and his motives, could it just be that his mind was gone on LSD? Simple as that.
Got out of hand. Got out of hand. Very well could have been. Yeah, I think so. Because back to him, right? Even after he was imprisoned, his influence remained strong, not just amongst his followers who would sit outside waiting for him to be released. And that day never came until he died in 2017. And there was more people who had nothing to do with him who would write letters to him or send threatening letters to people like Vincent Bugliosi, and responsible for putting him away, and some of those family members who turned against him during the trial. And some would even commit crimes in his name. But going back to Terry O'Neill's claims that he was created by the state so they could then move him into the savior position, maybe the public would see how bad the hippies were running wild, and they would turn over to the government and say, help us, we need structure, we need order, we need control. But is that really what happened? Because nothing's provable. The CIA, the FBI, no one can tell if they were ever linked to Manson. And like I said, O'Neill couldn't provide the facts.
Yeah.
But is it plausible that government agencies did let him run wild, knowing that the fallout would help them in their agenda?
To give this mission to someone like that would,
Yeah, because it could go very bloody wrong, couldn't it, really? As it kind of did.
But I think with history, never say never, because you just never know what the real truth is.
And culturally too, we're looking at this through a lens of now, when we don't really understand what the cultural mood of the time was. And I mean, it's hard to know, but to me, I think it all sounds a bit far-fetched. And this dude has no facts in his book, and it took him 20 plus years to write that book, and it ended up being a bit flimsy.
And then so I'm not Netflix documentary. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm not sure either. It was an interesting idea, and I did have a little look into it for a moment, but really, I guess we know what we know, and it's quite comfortable to know that, even though it's really uncomfortable stuff, I'm happier to be in that, that he thought he was starting a race war, or he was cross because he thought that Terry Melchers would be in the house. And if no one else is there, just kill whoever you see, is actually what he said. And another thing he said, actually, during the trial, pre-trial, and after the trial, he would often bring this up to people who confronted him about his crimes and what he'd done. He'd say, these children that come at you with knives, they are your children. You taught them. I didn't teach them. I just helped them to stand up. He was saying that these children were a mirror of society.
Wow.
Basically, whether or not he was helped, watched, or just conveniently allowed to do his thing, that's all up for debate.
Yeah. Wow. Well,
That's the end of that story.
It's funny because because I'm not a conspiracy theorist type of person, and I think what you said, Geordie, is interesting because like a lot of people, normal people in society, like to live in comfort. And so all the goings on that sure does happen. You see in the movies and the FBI and the CIA, like you don't know to what extent that sort of stuff happens and what goes on behind those doors, for the protection of society. You've gone down a rabbit hole and so many conspiracy theories, but I'm the type of person, I like to sit in my comfortable home and just have things. If I can have them neatly in a bow, I will. Otherwise, I do not delve into
Just
them.
switch it off.
Yes, exactly.
Mez, like you, I like to hide in some comedy. And how I link Charles Manson was I saw Marilyn Manson at the big day out in 1999, and I witnessed him put a microphone up his bottom.
what?
And this makes me feel
Ew.
this distraction from the conspiracy theory is going to make me sleep tonight. It made no noise. I was waiting for the muffled sounds.
What was he doing that for? Honestly.
I don't know, but I remember I was waiting and ready to see another band, Hole, and I never forget, he just put the microphone right up his bottom. I was like, ew.
God. Somebody's got to use that after him. Maybe he knew that Courtney Love was going to be next and he didn't like her very much.
Well, he had to sing back into
What
it.
year was that?
1999.
Oh my God. I was at that big day out.
Which one? Sydney or Melbourne?
Oh, Sydney.
Oh, that's in the Melbourne one.
So you didn't put each other on your shoulders.
No.
No. But there's some
Shame.
little connection there.
Yes.
That's cute.
Yes. No, because I remember the whole Courtney Love thing that was going on, and actually my friend was the promoter and he brought her out and she went to a psychic and the psychic told her all this stuff, and then I went to the same psychic afterwards, and it was all kind of crazy. But I think that's where she threw her shoe into the crowd and they kept her shoe, and she's like, give me back my fucking shoe. And it was chaos that big day out.
I met her after that big day out, and I told her that she looked stunning. I had no idea about the shoe, but she loved me. She loved me like Marilyn Manson loved his microphone.
Oh, God. Well, she didn't try and put you up her arse.
God, no.
Oh, this has been so much fun, guys. I've really enjoyed today. Thank you so much for being on our podcast and for having us on your podcast.
Thank you very much for reaching out and orchestrating this. And thank you to all our listeners listening in. And as I said, this is our hall pass and we love you guys. So let's share audiences, not share Marilyn Manson's microphone. And
No sharing of microphones. You don't know who's had it before you or where it's been.
But thank you, ladies. This has been wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Look, girls, there's only 3 things left to say at the end of all of this.
Wherever you are,
Whatever you do,
just keep eavesdropping.
Woo, woo, woo.
Eavesdropping, eavesdropping, dropping, eavesdropping, dropping, eavesdropping, eavesdropping,
drop it.